All right, welcome to another episode of the Educators Podcast. I am Mr. Burden, and with me is Brandon Williams, aka Talking with Fresh. He is a educator who has left the classroom. He is a teacher advocate. He is also the creator of Ball Exclusives. So if you are an even tiny bit basketball fan, you need to definitely check that out. And I am excited to have him on here because he has been speaking the truth that we all feel in our hearts. And Brandon, thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure to be on. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. I've just recently discovered your videos. I think a lot of us are feeling the same way. And you're speaking the truth. I really liked your part about special educators, and we'll definitely want to get into that. But I wanted to just first kind of touch on what brought you into education, and if you could kind of share with us what got you, what made you decide to leave the
Yes,
class.
sir. Yes, sir. Well, first of all, again, thank you for the invite. Appreciate the opportunity to be on. What first got me into education was, I've always had just a passion for coaching, for
Mm-hmm.
mentoring, just using my voice to be able to inspire, however that may work out. And I was just trying to figure out what avenue was the best way to do all of the above. And I remember being, early 20s, and I was a part of a group that they had a mentoring program, and I did that, and I was like, man, this is pretty cool. And I never forget, I was working at a bank a couple of years, after that, and it was just pulling at me, just pulling and pulling and pulling. And I just remember going into my manager's office, and and I was telling her, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I have to follow where my heart is pulling me, which is into education. And I just broke down crying, like right there at her
Wow.
at her desk. And she told me, said, well, Brandon, I think you need to do that. And I was working in the banking industry, and I was pretty much on the track to probably be, I was a banker. I was probably going to be a branch manager at some point.
Mm-hmm.
The way that my production was going, who knows, if I would have stuck with banking, maybe I would have been a district manager, regional, whatever the case may have been. So the trajectory was there based on how I was performing very well in that role. And that's usually kind of what they were trying to do with the bank that I was with. But that's not where my heart was at. So that's what led me into teaching, and also wanting to coach and whatnot. I was big basketball, as you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's sports is a huge passion of mine. And my first position in the school system was actually, depending on which part of the country, everybody calls it different, whether it's a teacher's assistant, a paraprofessional. That's what it
Mm-hmm.
was called when I was in Alabama. And I was doing that, making literally next to nothing, maybe $1,100 for the entire month. That's how much I was making. But it was so fulfilling, like just
Yeah.
being at the school, being with the kids. I was at a high school. Even at the position I was in, I was getting cussed out a lot. But I mean, it was just so fulfilling, because those same kids who cussed me out, like, they really depended on me. Like they would come to my classroom just to vent. Like, they needed someone to be an advocate for them. So even though I may have been someone that, according to them, got them in trouble, they knew that it was, I was really trying to look out for them.
Yeah. Place of
So
love. Yeah, it came from a place of
exactly,
love. Yeah.
exactly. So fast forward, after 8 years of being, I got my teacher's license, my master's in special ed, 8 years of teaching. You're kind of seeing the direction of where being an educator and kind of what they want you to do. It wasn't really what I got into it for.
Yeah.
I'm all for the kids, like 100%, like without a question. That's what I'm about. And if I'm starting to feel like that's not what the standard really is, like there might be some lip service that they're giving, but that's not really what the actions are, then I felt like I just needed to pull away, because it was starting to really eat at me. I was literally drained
Yeah.
coming home. Just didn't have nothing else to give to my family. Um, you know, you know how it is. You school day ends at 3 o'clock. You got to sit there and wait for dismissal. Dismissal takes 45 minutes sometimes. By the time you even walk out the building, assuming that you have nothing else to do, which is very rare. So
Yeah,
if
no,
you want to make sure you got your
no
exactly
IEPs or anything, right?
right. So if you have lesson plans that you want to make sure that you're get for the next day, I mean, you can easily leave after the final bell ends at 3 o'clock. You can easily leave 4:30, 5 o'clock. So dinner time is, as soon as you walk home. Then if you got kids like I do, you got to make sure you entertain them for a little bit. Then it's help with baths. And then you don't have any time for yourself or for anything. So that was becoming like a routine for me. And it was just way too much for me to deal with. And February 28th of 2022, I said that was it. So that's kind of where we are now.
It's interesting too, and you mentioned when you're talking about you left, they had that moment, and when you're in banking, I think a lot of us, like, there's that saying where, if you can't teach, but I think there's a fallacy in that, because a lot of us can do, but teaching, would you agree that teaching's a calling? Like, the fact that a lot of us are willing to take a pay cut to become educators, become those mentors, and leave a profession that we may be really doing well in, and succeeding in, but it's different when it's not just money. It's also, education. It's filling your soul. It's almost like, would you agree? It's like filling. It's kind of, you're finding your peace. You're finding where you belong.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you hit it right on the head. And that's kind of what I was leading into it, where, the trajectory where I was at in the banking industry would have yielded me 2-3 times more than I would have made as a teacher. But, I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. And, I wanted to have some form of fulfillment. And one thing my dad told me, he said, Brandon, what you have to do is try to find that fulfillment outside of your actual position. But I just didn't want that to necessarily be where my life was at the time. I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of be right in that moment. Yes, I mean, I could have joined a basketball league or some other hobby outside of work, which I encourage everyone to do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm gonna spend eight hours a day somewhere, I want to feel some form of fulfillment if I can, if possible. And I felt like I was at the right time in my career, my age. I was in my mid-20s, so I wanted to go ahead and just make that decision right then. But yes, you have to have a calling to do this, because at the end of the day, in my opinion, if you're not doing it for the children, then I'm really not understanding what you're in it for.
Yeah.
And that's what I was, like I said earlier, I was 1,000% for the children, and that's where I left. I came in for the kids and I left for the kids.
A lot of teachers feeling the same way. It's like, and a lot of people say that teachers are quitting, but I would contend that once you're an educator, like, you're an educator, you're always an educator. I feel like there's that calling, whether you might find a different avenue, like coaching, or you might be tutoring, or you might be doing some form of education. But do you feel like, instead of us teachers leaving the profession is kind of leaving us?
Oh yeah, it's not the same.
Mhm.
And I don't know what the exact rate is. I know I looked at numbers, but I know that it's increasing in terms of teachers, not just retiring earlier or leaving, but like they're leaving mid-year.
Mhm.
Like I remember being my first few years teaching. I can't recall, and this was 2014 when I first started, or really 2011 when I was in education. But I don't recall like teachers leaving before the school year was out.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong. You may have been in it a lot longer than I have, but I definitely know like the last 3 or 4 years that we had a lot more teachers that were starting to slowly. And then my last year we had 4 or 5 that left the profession altogether, and that had
Mhm.
never happened since I had been there.
Yeah.
So I started looking. I was like, "Is this a normal thing?" And apparently, it had been. And I think, like you said, I mean, the profession is changing. It was always a bureaucratic type of situation, unfortunately, but now it's even more so, to the point where it's like, well, what are we here for? Like, are we here just for the test and the numbers? Or are we really here for the kids? And
Mhm.
like I said, if it's not here for the kids, then I don't want to be a part of it.
Exactly. What would you say should be the focus of education? Like, I mean, again, it seems like it's more, money and scores, but what should be the focus of education?
Yeah, well, I think it needs to go back to what probably some of the original fundamental principles were just, how are we making them better citizens?
Yes.
What are we actually teaching them? uh and I don't want to get too much in terms of textbook and curriculum stuff, but I mean, even when I was in school, I mean, I said the same thing, like, is this really going to benefit me in my life? you know I mean, I taught electives, so I was kind of fortunate that I could actually kind of impart some of that real world type stuff.
Yeah.
And this is no offense to anybody who teaches math, social studies, science, language arts, or whatever, because all of those, they have their place. But to the point, it's like, okay, if I know some calculus, but I can't tell you anything about finance, and I can't tell you how to get a house, or what is credit, what is debt,
Yes.
or whatever the
Yes.
case may be, then what are we really teaching them? And if I was a math teacher and I wanted to have a unit on that, yeah, some of the parents may love it and praise it, but if the test scores of what I'm supposed to be teaching them doesn't reflect, then I'm considered a bad teacher or incompetent, and that's just unfair. So those are the
Absolutely.
things that I feel are lacking tremendously within this field, and it's just really unfortunate.
Yeah, it blows my mind that we're making everybody take trigonometry, but we're not teaching, like, instead of having like a 2 week unit on finances, we should have like a class on what is credit, how do you buy a house, what's the difference between renting and buying, how does credit affect you, balancing a bank account. It just really, it's a shame that we're kind of breaking away from that. And I wish we could kind of tweak the system so that we, like, around middle school, you start to have different paths for different students for their interest. You know what I mean? Like, some
Right.
students may want to explore wood shop or mechanic engineering, where some kids may want to explore some of the arts, or some kids may want to explore athletic medicine or something like that. Yeah, I feel like we're kind of missing some of those fundamental and life skills too. I feel like it's taken for granted that we're, what we do as teachers, we're not just teaching a curriculum, we're also imparting life skills. Would you agree about that? I think that kind of gets lost in the shuffle. I think
Oh yeah.
sometimes.
Well, 100%. I mean, and that's what I was telling you. And I don't know how some of the other elective teachers did, but I know for me, and maybe I wasn't always praised for it, so to speak, but I would look at the curriculum. I was like, look, I mean, some of it's okay, but I really want to teach them this, and
Yeah.
if I got to take the bullet for it, then I'll take it, because at least I can go home and say I taught them something that I know for a fact is going to help them and be beneficial. And because some of it was just so like cookie cutter, like, I'm like, did y'all ever take a computer science class? The people who came up with this curriculum, like, this isn't really going to help them as much as if they do this. Or
Yeah.
if we do an exploring careers class, okay, well, let's amp it up a little bit more, and let's do that type of thing.
Mhm.
So that was really just how I did. So yeah, I may have been, I don't want to say rogue, but I did kind of do my own thing a little bit, because I felt like, again, I'm here for the kids, and I can sprinkle in the normal curriculum stuff, get that out the way, but I also want to teach them this stuff over here, because I felt like that would be more beneficial.
Mhm.
And maybe some other teachers just didn't feel as comfortable doing that. And I know that, unfortunately, the core teachers, they have no wiggle room, and it's really
Mhm.
sad. And here's an example. Um, when the middle school that I taught at last, we had our eighth grade ELA teachers. They had a wonderful spoken word unit that they did. It was the first time that they had ever did it. And I think the county had put it in there for like maybe that first year, just to test it out, and it was
Mhm.
brilliant. It was beautiful. Like I would take some of my kids and I would take them down because they would do the spoken word stuff like out in the open for some of the other classes kind of to be able to partake in it. So I
Yeah.
would take my kids. I'm like, man, I got to see this. This is great. There's some of my students in there, some players that I coached are in there, and they would just bare their souls out in this spoken word piece that they put together. And then the next year, I was like, hey, y'all doing the spoken words? I can't wait. They're like, nah, they took it out.
Ugh.
They. And I was just like, what? They took it out? That's one of the best things that I saw y'all
Mm.
do at that point. Probably 5 or 6 years that I've been like, this is probably one of the best units I've seen y'all do. Like, she's like, yeah, they took it out. That's just what it is. And so it's stuff like that things that are so different from what you would probably normally get in your language arts class, but it's something that allows them to express themselves. It
Hmm.
teaches them, like you mentioned, like life skills. Like sometimes there's so many students that they'll just sit there and they might be straight A students, but they just sit there. They don't even have an opportunity to get up and express themselves and do some form of um uh what's it called? Public speaking.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
and real quick, just to kind of point on to get on that,
Hmm.
I did have a student that was in that class, and she was so nervous. She had a really good poem, but she was so nervous to speak. And I said, "Look," her name was Sharon. I said, "Look, just do it. You never know unless you try it." And she did it. And I think she felt a whole lot better about herself because she did it. But she would never had that opportunity if the curriculum was just how it got back to, which was, okay, we're just going to do this, and this, and then we won't step outside of the box and do something like spoken word that could really be beneficial. So those are the things that are core teachers, in my opinion. It's a little unfortunate for them.
And that's the thing too. That student, Sharon, she's not going to remember the learning target or the she's not going to remember the XYZ strategy. She's going to remember that moment when she got up and she was nervous and you encouraged her to get up and read her poem. She created something and
Right.
some art and she spoke it. And that's what drives me nuts is kids aren't going to remember the what grade they got on their quiz. They're going to remember the activities that they do. And you can, and I feel like we're kind of going the opposite direction of where we should with education. Is we have people that haven't been in a classroom in years, if they've ever been, making decisions on for people where we're on the front line. We know what engages, we know what gets kids fired up, what gets them excited and active. And I don't know about you, but do you feel like if sometimes when it comes to motivation that it's more to do with if the kids know what the benefit is for them, or if they're engaged in what they're learning, they'd be a lot more active?
Oh, I mean, I think that's with anybody, whether it's
Yeah.
the children, adults, no matter what it is. I don't know how it is for every single district or whatnot, but I've subbed a few times since I've left. And I wanted to kind of see where things were at the high school. And
Hmm.
we have a newer high school where I am in my county, in my area rather. And I sub there because I have a lot of former students that attend that high school. So I like to be able to go and see them and say hello and that type of thing. And the thing that they told me, they have this thing called modern teaching now. And I don't know if they have it at your school or whatnot. So basically, what modern teaching is, for those who don't know, is essentially where the teacher is just there to kind of just facilitate and oversee. Like there's no instruction really being given. It's all on Google Classroom, and it's just for the student to kind of work at their own pace. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some good aspects to that.
Hmm.
However, you know, the feedback that I got, because what I would do when I was sub, I say, all right, y'all, the last 20 minutes of the class, I want to just have an open conversation and let's just talk. And they were all for it. Like they were like,
Yeah.
yeah, like we never even have a chance to even say anything. Like, okay, so cool. So I was like, hey, give me what's y'all's thoughts on this modern teaching? Someone like, well, I mean, it's good because we get a chance to work at our own pace. We can kind of go ahead and get our stuff done. And if we have questions, we can just email the teacher or whatever. However, it's like, I kind of want to like have some sort of discourse. Like I like to hear what the teacher's thoughts. Like I want to feel like I'm like learning something.
Mm.
And not only that, like if I'm like really smart, kind of going back to your motivation, if I'm really smart, like, somebody else gets the same opportunities I get because they get to take the test as many times as they want. Like there's like
Mhm.
no no what am I trying to say? Like everybody's like in the same boat now.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so it's so frustrating for a lot of these students because they're just kind of just lumped in saying, okay, well, just open up your laptops and put your headphones in, and I'll see y'all at after the hour and a half is over with for the class period, or something
Imagine
like that. And it's like,
Yeah. Imagine
yeah,
applying that to basketball. All right, LeBron, you're only allowed to score 10 baskets, and then we've got to let Billy McGee score 10 baskets. Like everybody's
right,
got to score the same amount of points. It's like, and Billy gets to take as many shots as he's allowed to. And it's like, LeBron's just sitting there on the bench going, come on, man, come on. Yeah, we need to make sure we reward our rock stars, like the
right,
kids that put in the effort that really, and I almost feel like we're more concerned with the quality of outcome versus a quality of opportunity. I almost feel like we're focused more on hey, getting everybody above some fictitious standard, and we're not challenging the kids that are already above the standard, finding what's their next level, what's going to engage them. And just like the lack of discourse in the core curriculum just drives me nuts. I feel like the best teachers I remember as well as worked with as an adult are those rogue teachers that said, like you did, all right, stop what you're doing. Let's talk about this and just get a conversation going. And again, it goes back to what those kids are going to remember. I also think it's interesting too. You're talking about the kids that cuss you out are also the kids that come back to you for advice. Why do you think that is? What is it about those kids where they might cuss you out, but then you're their person they go to for that kind of thing?
very good question. Here's what I remember I mentioned this in a faculty meeting one time. Our principal, um, he asked a question. I wish I remember the exact question, but it was along the lines of attitude for students, and why some students you know may walk in the classroom feeling a certain type of way. And I remember raising my hand. I said, well, uh, a lot of times these kids, um, they may come to school without having anybody at their house, show them any sort of love, affection, maybe
Yep.
not have kissed them or hugged them on the way out. All day long, they getting yelled and screamed at, and their only safe space is at school. So the only time they
Mm-hmm.
even feel safe to even express themselves, good or bad, is at school. So my job, at least I felt, was to give them that opportunity to feel safe. I always told my kids, this is a safe space. Yes, there are expectations and consequences that come with that. However, I want you to feel safe in my classroom. So if I get on to you, it's not me because I feel like I just want to scream at you. It's because I'm trying to make you better.
Yeah.
So in the example that I gave you earlier, I wasn't even a teacher yet. I was just an aide. I had my own room. I was kind of like not really like a ISS or whatnot, but it was kind of a play on that.
Yeah.
But I would get a lot of the special ed kids, the kids who skipped class, the kids who would smoke in the bathroom. But I would always explain to them, why I was doing that. Like I wanted more and better for you. I wouldn't just say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you're screwing up, so I'm going to get you in trouble. And then I wouldn't have any explanation or any conversation at all. Like if the fact that they knew that I would care, they knew that I cared about them to give them my time and my attention, that's what made them come back to me. That's what
Yeah.
made them walk out of their own classroom and come to me to just vent, things like that. And that's where a lot of the teachers, the really good, which there are a lot of really good ones.
Mm-hmm.
When you see them, and their students are give them all this praise and adoration, it's because they have made them feel special. Because maybe they are getting that, but a lot of them they're just not getting that at all at their own home life. And I feel like going back to bureaucratic and screw the test scores. Sorry for that,
No,
but just
no
forget the test
apologies.
scores. Yeah, like there needs to be more of, okay, how can we, not to say that it's necessarily our job to be these kids' parents and whatnot, but how can we, show more support to some of these kids who really need it? Because there's
Yeah.
some of these, I'm sure you sat on meetings or had phone calls or whatever, and there's some parents that, like, I just feel, just my heart just goes out to the kids. I'm like,
Hmm.
I see why they act a certain way in my classroom or at
Yep.
school. This is what they deal with at home. So I mean, it's just so much that just goes in that. A lot of people on the outside, like you said, we're on the front lines. We deal with this stuff and have dealt with this stuff on a daily basis, that just a lot of people just have no idea that what teachers really go through. And you got emails that you got to follow up with, you have phone calls you have to follow, you got grades you got to follow up with, all the while you're still having to deal with behavior, um, the good behavior, the bad behavior. You got to console somebody sometimes. I mean, there's all types of stuff, all to get, 35 to 45,000 or whatever your district is, whatever it is typically a lot lower than what it should be, and that takes a toll. So, those are just a lot of the things that I wish that people really could see. Like, I
Hmm.
wish that they could take a camera and just put it into like 20 random teachers and just show like what a week's worth of that content looks like, just so you can really
Yeah.
see what we all deal with and have dealt with.
It's like a lot of folks that complain about teachers. They'll make a comment about like slamming teachers for this and that. And I'm like, great. Hey, you know what? Sounds like you're an expert. Why don't you come sub for a week? Why don't you take my classroom for a week and see how that rolls, or why don't you come sub in one of these other systems? And where do you think where is that balance though between providing structure for the kids versus like not but also like avoiding coddling, but also so you having enough structure so you're not coddling, but also understanding the kids and who they are and where they come from, and choosing those battles? Where is that balance? And do you feel like sometimes the schools go one way or the other too far?
Well, this is what I'll say to that question. And it may not be the right answer, what you're looking for, but this is what I've always said. There has to be some form of balance, starting with the school administration itself. Like, there has to be an
Hmm.
expectation of support, of this is what we're going to not allow. And if it does happen, um, then these are the consequences that will take place. Not just saying
Yeah.
it for lip service, because um, I'm sorry, not just saying it for lip service, because
Hmm.
if you're just talking, then, and you're not giving any action, then that's where there's going to be a huge disconnect. So for me, and it's funny you mentioned, because I actually am in the middle of putting together a course for like classroom management, and how I used to do my expectations and consequences. Like, I did that the very second day of school every year, not the first day. First day was always about, kind of, icebreakers, getting to know who the kids
Hmm.
were. But the second day was always like, I'm taking the entire class period, and in my case, I only have 45 minutes. I wish it was longer,
Hmm.
but I only have
Yeah.
45 minutes basically. But I would take that entire 45 minutes and I would go over expectations and consequences. And I would make sure that you understood exactly how Mr. Williams' class was going to go, how I expected to go. So you would have to, I had a PowerPoint, so you would have to write it down. You would hear me go over it, and then you would be assessed on it. So I had a quiz that you had to take, probably like the week next week. So that was
Hmm.
3 methods of delivery that I would tell them. So it's your choice whether or not you would choose to not meet the expectations, because there would be consequences that came with that. And they knew what the expectations were because they wrote all the expectations down. They knew what the consequences were because they wrote down all the consequences. So that's where the structure and the balance came on my end. But it also had to be on the
Yeah.
administrative side as well, which, some schools have really good administration where, they back the teachers 100%. And then sometimes you have, and I've been unfortunately in that case where the administration is not as strong, and they kind of, cave a little bit to what the district and what the parents, the threat of the parents and all that type of
Hmm.
stuff. I didn't care about any of that. I'm
Yeah.
like, look, this is this this is my classroom. This is how it is. And I'll tell you what, not to say that I didn't care, in that, because I had it so ironclad that it's like, look, you know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and that also goes back to the whole safe thing that I was telling you about. Like, there would be so many students, I'm talking about so many students that they would come in my classroom and they would just thank me, because they would come from one classroom where, kids are just moving about however they felt, it's loud, and they come
Yeah.
in my classroom and it's like, it's so relaxed, it's calm, it's quiet. I had no foolishness going on. And then, like, some of those quote unquote introverted type kids or shy kids, they would be like, thank you. Like, I just, it's so calm in here. I appreciate you for that. So a lot of it falls on the teacher itself, but there's also a huge part and portion that falls on the administration to make sure that if you do have issues, where there's a lack of structure somewhere on the students side, that that's where it can't penetrate the administration. Once it penetrates the administration and the students feel like, oh well, shoot, my parent can complain, then it's
Mm-hmm.
you have this. It's nothing much that you can really do. And I feel like there's so many different teachers that have that type of complaint, where the school that they teach at, and it just makes it very difficult to teach. Even if you do have a rock solid classroom, still, if you don't have that administrative support, it makes it really, really difficult.
Do you feel like I think that's tremendous, and the fact that kids are coming back to thank you, that's a tremendous compliment to you. That's because, and I feel like kids crave that structure. They need to know. It's almost like, was it somebody said, one of my colleagues said that if you can't stand up to me, then how are you going to stand up for me? It's like they're test. They need to know where there's boundaries, and they want that environment. And you set the expectations day one, and you have that consistency. Then the kids, it's familiar. The kids' routine. The kids know what to expect when they walk in Mr. Williams' class, and they feel that. But it's interesting. But the administration support is so crucial, and I feel like it's like they're afraid of the parents. I know it's, yeah, there's this, they're afraid, they don't want them going over their head and getting them in trouble but it feels like over the years there's been a shift in, like, there's a lack of respect for teachers that when I was a kid, if I did something at school, if my teacher called my parents about something I did, like, the burden of proof was on me. But now it's like a parent calls the school, it's like the teacher's automatically in trouble unless there's something else, unless they can prove that there was an issue. What? All right, we're going to take a quick break from solving all of the world's problems to tell you about a good friend of mine and a service she's offering. Are you tired of feeling like your dream financial future is out of reach? Are you struggling with overwhelming debt, trying to pay off your home early, or simply wanting to give more? Well, my good friend Vanessa Rudder Jackson is here to help. An educator and military veteran, Vanessa is here to guide you through the confusion and make your dream financial future a reality. With her certified financial coaching services, she'll help you create a personalized plan that sets you up to win with money. As an educator and a mother of two, Vanessa understands the challenges of scraping by and stretching paychecks. She's been there, and she knows how to navigate the financial landscape to help you thrive. Don't let financial stress hold you back any longer. Take the first step towards financial freedom today with Rudder Jackson Financial Coaching. Reach out to Vanessa today for a free 45-minute consultation at varudder34@gmail.com or go to tinyurl.com/RJ-money-coach. That's varudder34@gmail.com or tinyurl.com/RJ-money-coach. Remember, it's never too late to take control of your finances and achieve your dreams. Start your journey to financial freedom with Rudder Jackson Financial Coaching today. All right, now let's get back to solving the world's problems with the most charming host on the interwebs. Do you feel like that there's a disrespect for teachers, and how do you think that may have have generated?
I'll say I don't think it's an overall disrespect, but I do believe and I feel like it's not as, like you mentioned, like the teacher's word is not as strong as it used to be.
Hmm.
Like you mentioned, if whenever I was younger, teacher called my parent, there wasn't a question. It wasn't, oh, are you sure? Or well, let me get another or somebody else is opinion on that, or let me talk to the principal or whatever. It was, oh, well, Brandon, teacher just called, you're in trouble. Like it wasn't really a whole lot of conversation. I mean, obviously it wasn't just, oh well, they just take the teacher's word
Yeah.
without letting me explain, like,
Hmm.
but usually, then and even now, if a teacher's calling, they're calling for a reason. I mean, we have other stuff to do. We're not just calling to waste your time as teachers, to parents. Like, your child obviously or pretty much did something
Hmm.
that was not in line with what the expectations were for either the classroom or for the school. So, now, it, I feel like there are some parents, and I had a lot of wonderful parents. I don't want to
Yeah.
put, it all on the parents, but there are some parents, unfortunately, where if you do, you know, chastise the child or you try to reprimand them in some kind of way, they're trying to find some kind of way to say, okay, well, I don't think that it's all my kid's fault. So how can I kind of circumvent this and see if I can make sure that I don't have this issue, because my child can't be that bad when they really are that bad,
Hmm.
and and it gets to the point where where the districts, they feel like, man, we don't want any more lawsuits. So, just do the bare minimum, because we don't want this to be a situation where we have to fork out money or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. I can kind of give you an example. I don't know if you remember, or hopefully it didn't happen at your school, but I think it was a couple years ago. They had this little TikTok challenge about the bathrooms or something, where they were
Yep.
like destroying bathrooms or
Hmm.
whatever. So unfortunately, that happened at my school, and I think the kid that did it, or the kids that did it, they got like 2 days of ISS or something. If it was 2 days of out of school suspension, it may have been 2 days max. But I don't even think it was. I want to say it was like ISS, and that
Hmm.
was really it. And I'm just thinking, are you serious?
Yeah.
So I can trash a bathroom, tear out the toilet dispenser and all that, throw uh, juice and all that type of stuff, and just destroy it, and that's it. Like that's all I get. I get a vacation. That's it. You
Yeah.
know, and it's stuff like that, because the school systems themselves, they're just they've catered to the parents too much, to where the power, or the threat of being disciplined is not there anymore. Like
Yeah.
some of the students just don't care, and it's unfortunate. I mean, you have a lot of really good students, but it's always just a few that know and understand that, okay, well, I can probably get away with a little bit, or they're only going to give me X amount of days. And that takes a lot. Going back to your question, it takes a lot of the power away from the teachers, because that respect as a whole is not really given where it really needs and should be.
Yeah, it's like if you tell a kid, "Hey, you're gonna get 2 days of suspension, but your TikTok video is gonna blow up, and you're gonna get all these new likes and follows." They're 2 days, they're all for that.
Right.
It's almost like, yo, don't twist my arm. Um, and I want to get into specifics about SPED, but it seems like with a lot of us teachers, it's not one thing that just we did, like we're having a great time teaching, and then one day something happens and we quit. It's like straws, like the camel's back kind of thing. But what do you feel like specifically for you was kind of that straw, or you know what I mean? I have to get into specifics, but just what really made you decide I'm out. This is it. This is too much.
Yeah. Man. Well, for me, I had I felt like I probably could have gotten a little bit more support in some incidents that happened.
Mhm.
Um, you know, kind of self-inflicted. However, it was more so like understanding what the the whole entire landscape of things were, and it kind of went back to that whole um, bureaucracy type thing, because I never did
Yeah.
anything to break any rules. I was never that type of teacher or anything like that. But there was some things that took place where, I felt like, okay, me. I've been at the school at this time, 6+ years. I've never had any problems. The threat of parental or whatever it may have been, um, shouldn't overstep what you know of me personally and what my reputation is. So without going into any specifics, it was mainly something that those are things that it was kind of on the lines of that, where I just felt like, okay, this is a little bit too bureaucratic for my taste.
Hmm.
So it was kind of like it kind of led up from there to the point where I was kind of telling you, where I was just starting to feel, extremely just I had nothing else to really give. Like, and if I consider myself someone who wants to give everything to my students, and for the moment, if I feel like I'm giving them less than that, which it was starting to get to that point,
Yeah.
uh, the end of the 2021 semester, that year. So I left for 2022, February 2022. Um, and here was my thought process going into that year was, all right, this is because we were on COVID restrictions. So that
Hmm.
previous year we were doing virtual, but it was like half and half. So like the
Hybrid.
kids would
Yeah.
come in like these little what they call them, pods or something like that.
Yeah.
Cohorts.
Yeah.
So they would come in, like, maybe I was elected. I would get like 8 kids max in the classroom, and they were spread out. They had their mask on, so I was doing virtual and had them in the classroom with me, but it still didn't feel like teaching. So
Yeah.
that next year in 2021, fall of 2021, it was like, okay, the kids we will be back full go. They just will have masks on. I was like, well, great. I finally get a classroom full of kids. So I was finally like excited again. I'm just happy to have energy in the building. So
Yeah.
I was amped up, and I felt like I poured everything into that whole semester. But I knew that I was on my way. Like, this could potentially be my last year. Like, I
Hmm.
already knew that going into the school year, that, okay, this could potentially be it. So I want to really like give it my all. But by the time December hit, like, and I had I had some of the best kids in all
Yeah.
6 of my classes. I'm talking about just wonderful. Like, I couldn't have been blessed with a better group from the first period to the last period of kids. But once December hit, like, I was just like, man, like, I don't know. And then we had about a good 2.5 week break, and I just remember coming back, and I want to say our semester ended like a week and a half after Christmas break. So
Yeah.
I was already kind of like, man, this is gonna be tough. And then I just remember, um, like, I was like, man, I don't know if I can, because the difference with electives, for those who don't know, elective teachers and core teachers, our we get a whole new group of kids after the semester.
Yeah.
So
Which
if
is
I would have had those same kids, I probably would have been able to stick it out. But I was like, man, I got to do this all over again. I got to go back through learning a whole new group of kids, doing my expectations and consequences. Like, all that was like starting to like creep in. I was like, I don't think I can do it. Like, I just remember sitting there. We had like I think it was Martin Luther King holiday weekend or something like that. So I knew I had an extra day, and I was like, I don't think I can do this. Like,
yeah.
I tried my best. I was like, I don't think I have anything else, because I was already drained. Like, from that, like I told you, from that first semester, like, I gave them everything, and I was
Yeah.
like, I don't think I'd be able to give another group. I can't get the strength up to do it all over again. So I emailed my principal. I said, look, man, can I come in and talk to you? Because we were off that day. He was
Hmm.
working, and I just told him I can't do it anymore. Like, I can't teach. I can't be in this space anymore. Like, I
Yeah.
just, how it's done. Um, and he tried to kind of talk me out of it, and asked me if it was just kind of due to the times that we were in. I was like, nah, I can't do it. I have nothing else, and it's not fair to them. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to my colleagues. and I can't do it no more. So that was pretty much what it was, man.
Wow, it's what you just said. It's like so many teachers that have left recently. It's like I think it goes to what I think a lot of people don't realize what we do as teachers. You know, it's not just the curriculum. We're their mom, their dad, their nurse, their doctor. We're the game show host. We got to do all these things, and it. I think feel like we're our worst critics too. We know it's like we know when we can't be the all-star teacher that we know we could be, but we don't have the energy to do it anymore because we're so drained. And it's like yeah, it's like you it's almost like you I can't be that person that I in the classroom that I want to be. And so why am I here? And it's not fair to the kids. You know, teaching is not a job you can just quietly quit. You know, teaching is not something you can just go through the motions. It's like, it's almost like maybe that's why some teachers that start out great, when they after several years, if they get to a point where they might get a little bit bitter. Do you feel like a lot of folks, a lot of administration, education, the bureaucrats, do you think they're trying to pin a lot of the teachers leaving and the teacher shortage on the COVID times? And do you feel like these problems were there before COVID, and we're just kind of COVID's becoming like a scapegoat for these issues?
I mean, I think that some of them would like to use that. It definitely sounds good for a bureaucratic excuse. But I mean, you're right. I mean, these problems were long before COVID even came. I think COVID probably, at least for me, it definitely amplified them a whole lot because one of my biggest gripes was, you know, all of a sudden, we got teachers all over the country, all over the world, talking about lack of pay, lack of support, lack of resources. We get a worldwide catastrophe, basically, and then we get Chromebooks that just pop out of nowhere.
Yeah.
We get resources that just pop out of nowhere. I'm like, so we got money, but y'all can't give us an adequate raise. You can't ensure that we have adequate resources, make sure that our air and heat works properly. Because I was at a school where it would be in the wintertime and the heat would go out in some parts of the school, or the AC would go out in the spring and summertime. So we have some classrooms have to evacuate and go to another part of the building, or they have to bring in fans, which is not enough. They tell the teachers, well, y'all can wear shorts today if you need to. And it's like, oh yeah, you think? But yeah, it's just stuff like that. So I mean, it actually made me even more frustrated because I'm like, I'm thankful that we were able to support the kids and make sure that they were able to get their education squared away with providing them with resources and Chromebooks and hotspots and things of that nature. That was all great. However, why does it have to take a pandemic for all this stuff to come out the woodworks when we've been screaming and beating down the doors and having protests and things of that nature just to get something? Why did this have to take place for everybody to kind of see that, we do have money? It's just that, well, we pick and choose where we want the money to go. So it kind of just led me to, or it led me to believe even prior to that the reason why, or one of my theories is the reasons why the raises and the things don't come as quickly is because they know by and large that teachers, we have like they said, that teacher's heart. We're going to be here for the kids no matter what. Whether or not you pay us pennies or you pay us a whole lot more, we're going to be there because it hurts too much to leave the kids stranded. Like I don't want to leave. I don't want to just leave my kids mid-year like that, but I had to do it for me. So it's like, well, we'll throw a little raise here or there, but we don't want to give it to them all at once because they're not just going to mass exodus. The teachers aren't going to, they might strike for a day maybe, but they're not going to strike for a whole 2 weeks because they care too much. There'll be too many teachers that say, man, my kids, they got to get ready for integrated testing. Man, I don't know if I can do 2 weeks. It'd be so many of that happening, knowing that that's probably what we would need to do to like really get some change to happen. Like we would just have to threaten, we're going to not come for a whole semester. Y'all figure it out. If we did something like that, if all the educators got together and said, okay, we're not just going to protest for a day or two and then hope they change something. We're gonna protest for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Y'all figure
Or a
out how to
month.
do with
Yeah.
all these kids, or a month, right? And see how that happens. See what y'all do with a whole school full of kids. And I guarantee you, all these parents that get this free daycare, basically, they're gonna start saying, "Hey, please do something because I can't. I don't want to have my kid, not first of all at my house all day long, and then not getting the education. What do we need to do?" And it would cause an entire worldwide like situation. However, the teachers, by and large, like I said, it's like they know that somebody would cave, or
Yep.
it probably wouldn't be the threat that it would need to be because we care too much. And it's like they take advantage of that to the point where it's like, well, we'll just continue to give them, we'll pedal as much as we can until one day they finally do crack, which at some point I think it will. It's just going to take some time.
It's weird because it's kind of the prisoner's dilemma where everybody's feeling the same way, but nobody wants to be the first teacher to do it, and because they're going to be the one targeted. And then also there is that like oh, but what about the kids? And if we staged like a tomorrow every two or tomorrow, I'm not saying tomorrow because 4th of July, but like if you had one day where all the teachers just didn't show up, they'd have to shut down the school. But you're going to have a bunch of teachers that go in anyways because of the kids, and it's like that's the kind of stuff that where it's like, oh, they it's going to need they need to realize, and I really wish that teachers as a whole teachers realize that we really do have the power. I mean, without us, there is no education system. But it's I don't know if they're just biding time before they can. I don't know if they're going to switch to virtual or whatever. Like, I don't know what's going on. I feel like they're not paying attention to why teachers are leaving. They're busy looking for excuses, and instead of going, hey, let me ask you this question. If you had the choice between, like, if you could go back in the fall and teach another year, 2 semesters, 2 different groups, if you had the choice between double the pay but have nothing change, or keep the same pay that you've had before, but you have a teacher's assistant in the classroom with you, you have a teacher, a parent that will make copies, run stuff for you, and you guaranteed to have 100% support throughout the entire building, which would you choose?
Oh man, that's I might not be the right person to ask on that question. The reason why is because I ran a really tight ship.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a lot of what you're asking. Like I would have like a lot of my students as helpers,
Okay.
and they enjoy doing that. So not necessarily to have them make copies, but if I made copies, I would have somebody go pick the copies up for me.
Let me rephrase the question. Double the pay, or you have the entire year to teach however you want. Whatever you write your own, you just have to hit this, and this like learning target throughout the year, but nobody bothers you. They don't have to take an end of the year test. Everything is up to you. You run the classroom from day one to the end of the year, and nobody comes in to tell you do anything wrong. You're allowed to run your classroom the way you want it.
I think that the majority, and I'll try to speak for the majority of teachers on that one.
Yeah.
I think the majority of teachers would probably choose that option in terms of the same pay, because it really makes a huge difference. It makes a major difference. Because what good is having? Yeah, the money would be great. Don't get me wrong. I think a lot of us wish that we got a lot more pay as teachers. However, when you talk about all the other stuff that kind of compounds that with, the issues with making sure that the testing and the scores, and I mean all that type of stuff, it just weighs so much on you. And like you mentioned, I mean, just having the freedom to teach what you want, man. I mean that in and of itself is priceless. I mean, I can't tell you just how good it felt just to be able to do a couple units sometimes where I'm like, okay, this may not necessarily be exactly like in the curriculum. But I had a unit that I put together. It was I was teaching they call it office productivity. So it's
Mhm.
basically like Excel, Microsoft Word, that
Yeah.
type of stuff. Like teach them the office apps. And I found during my Excel, my Microsoft Excel unit, there was a lesson that I found that a local college they had a project. It was for like fantasy basketball, and I was like,
Oh,
I can
cool.
teach them how to use Excel by like us creating like a fantasy basketball version of it, because it was with Excel. So it incorporated math, it incorporated obviously using the spreadsheets, and they had an absolute blast. So, a lot of the students who, had, some of my girls, my female students who may or may not really care too much about sports, like they were like all into it because, they had to like research who these players were, because if you play any sort of, fantasy football or basketball or baseball, like you get points for, the best team. So it was a lot of research components involved with it. But it was so in depth. We had a draft, so I would play like
Oh,
this little
cool.
draft music. I had it like
Da,
I
da,
had it
da,
all.
da.
Yeah, man. Like had it written all on the board. And it was fun. And then we went through like a 2 or 3 week process where we would play like matchups against each other. So they had to submit their rosters to me before the next game. It was so cool, and so stuff like that. So just being able to do that, and imagine if I were to present that to my principal, like if you had a principal say, hey, I need to see your lesson plan, because I did have a principal like that before, my first
Yeah.
year teaching, had to submit lesson plans, and they say, okay, well, what's this? This ain't a part of curriculum. No, you can't do that. Well, you're like, well, okay, well, fine. So having that freedom to teach what you want is so rewarding, fulfilling, and priceless. So I would think that a majority of the teachers probably would choose that option, um, to probably keep the same pay versus double, but having all the strain and stresses of everything else that you're currently dealing with.
It sounds like you specifically though, you would run your ship, you would go for the more pay because you already know you're gonna run that ship tight, consistent, and go rogue if you have to. Right? Is that what you're kind of
Well, as an elective teacher, I had
Yeah,
a little bit more because we didn't have any
true.
testing. Like they took the testing away in my district, like 5 years ago.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's how much they care about electives. So, um, so after they did that, I was like, look, man, I gotta make sure that I feel okay about things, but also that I feel like that they're really learning some stuff. So yeah,
Mhm.
I would still teach the curriculum, but I would try to find a more feasible way that I felt would be a lot more palatable for the kids. Because
Mhm.
for example, teaching them computer science, I'm not a computer science major. Like I don't know, I know a little bit, but I want to make sure if I'm supposed to teach them computer science, I want them to have a program that really teaches them this stuff. So
Yeah.
the district had their program that they had, and I looked at it, I was like, I know enough about computer science that they're not going to get as much from this as they would from this one. So I researched and found a really good program, and I had some kids that they were just on it, and it was
Cool.
great. They were learning a lot about Python,
Yeah.
JavaScript, C++,
Scratch. Yeah.
all
Mhm.
that, and they wouldn't have been able to get exactly like that with what the district was proposing. So I mean, it was stuff like that, and it may not have been the best way that they probably would have liked it, but I mean, I felt had to make a a decision based on what I knew and what I felt was best, and if I get dinged for it, then I'll take the heat for it. But it's always going to be, like I mentioned to start the call off with, it's always going to be in the name of the kids, always.
I think that, and I think that's tremendous, and it is a shame because even now there's been kind of a subtle push to try to like delegitimize art and music classes and elective even in elementary they're kind of like music and art are almost kind of seen like not as important, which is a shame. But I want to talk to you about special education. I've sat in my share of IEP meetings, and I'm sure you have too. Do you do you see a shift in kind of how IEP, how special ed is being run, being managed in general? And do you see like for example, I don't know how it is in your district, but we would have self-contained rooms versus inclusion, and I'm all for letting the kids get involved in they can, but there to me it felt like there were certain students that inclusion was not their best option, and yet it almost felt like the district would just say no, put them in a regular classroom despite their needs. And what do you feel like do you feel like special education has changed, and maybe you haven't seen it from your perspective, or do you feel like that there's more, do you feel like there's less or more push for giving students the support that they need?
Oh man. Yeah, if we had more time, I could definitely I can expound even more on this.
Well,
Yeah,
I
cause
can
I
always bring you back for a part two. In fact, I do
yeah
want to do a special ed panel later this summer, like in August. I want to do a special ed panel. I'd love to have you come on and chat about that. But yeah, just your back of the box take on it.
yeah man. Like I mentioned, I mean, my first start in education was in the special ed department. You know, as a paraprofessional. You know, I dealt with all the students who, you know, they wanted me to kind of help crack down on the skipping and that type of stuff. And most of the
Yeah,
students who did that were in special ed. So I had a whole list of who these students were, and I made it a real, I had a really conscientious effort to learn who these kids were. Um, and it was so sad in some of these situations because as I mean, their behavior or their their disability affected the way that they learned.
yeah,
So you have some where their behavior was the disability, so that impacted their learning. They had a SLD, a specific learning disability, that impacted the way they learn, whether it was dyslexia or whatever the case may be. And some of those students, as you mentioned, I felt like, and they would even say this to me, like they would be in these regular classrooms and they felt so out of place.
yeah,
Like, and that would cause them to behave even more because, if they're being asked to do stuff that they just can't do, and sometimes the teachers, the regular ed teachers, they really don't always know exactly what the limitations are. So they're like, okay, this kid's just acting up, but they just want to be bad. And it's like, no, they really just, they can't do it, or
yeah,
they don't have all the support that they really need. Not to say that the teacher's not giving it to them. It's just that the environment is not conducive specifically for them.
hmm,
So I was actually really fortunate. After that same school that I got my start in, I went back and did my student teaching. And the lady that I did my student teaching, like, she was like one of the rare people in the whole county. I think she was one of two people who had a math certification and a special ed certification. So
wow,
she was certified in high school math and special ed. So she had, like, it was basically self-contained. So she had a whole room of kids who normally would be in an inclusion class, but she was able to teach them. It's just nothing but her. So no inclusion teacher, because she was the sped teacher,
wow,
which was great
yeah,
because she had all the requisite skills to number one, teach them math, but also provide the proper support because she was a sped teacher. So I was there for 3 periods, just watching how they acted, and they were so loose, so much more comfortable, because there's like, they look left and look right, and everybody is just like them. You
hmm,
know, everybody has some form of a disability. Some of them, were a lot more higher functioning than others. But it made it so much easier, and you could just see how much more confident they were. But then you watch them in a special ed, I mean, in a regular ed classroom, and it would be one of two things: either they wouldn't say a word, or they're acting up because they don't really want to be there, or they don't feel
yeah.
comfortable being in there.
Yeah, it's unreasonable to ask somebody to achieve something that's way out of their zone of development. It's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you have this disability, but we're going to stick you in a general ed class or an inclusion classroom with regular students without disabilities that are naturally achieving this, and make you feel by comparison, oh, how come you're not keeping up with them? Versus when they get that direct instruction and support, they're going to thrive. I feel like that's something that we're kind of decaying on in teaching now. It more and more is a push to push kids into inclusion, and that's shame. I mean, we could, like I said, you could do a part two
Oh yeah.
on sped. I want to wrap up, but I mean, I'd love to talk for 5 hours with you, because I really feel like you're completely you're speaking the truth for a lot of education. I feel like we need more voices like yours, and we need to amplify your voice. I want to ask just kind of about sports, and also a little bit about the ball exclusives, and I want to know when we're going to see you on ESPN Sports Center commentating. But talking about sport, the importance of sports in education, and like, not every kid's gonna go to the basketball court or gonna play soccer or gonna play hockey, but like, what are the importance of extracurricular activities for kids? Do you feel like we need to find more, or do you feel like how does that help a student, become more of help them grow as a citizen, if you will?
Yeah, I think, it doesn't necessarily have to be sports, but like you mentioned, any form of extracurricular activity that's that's different from just the school environment. I mean, it just opens them up to so many different things. I mean, you see some students who, you might have them in. I've been in middle school for the majority of my education career. You might have them in sixth grade, and in seventh grade, they're the same kid. Haven't really stepped out to do much of anything different. Then all of a sudden, they try, track, or they try, some other club or whatnot. Might be the chess club or computer science club. Then all of a sudden they see kids that, these kids are a lot like me. And then it just opens them up to so many different, ways of thinking, and, their confidence increases. They feel a lot more, they feel a lot better about themselves. I mean, any form of extracurricular activity, I support, 10,000%, because, I was always active. I was always in something, typically sports, because that was a big passion of mine. But, I think that there needs to be a really concerted effort. You don't want to force any kid to do anything, but, to really try to push them into doing something, because there's something for everybody. I mean, and I wish that more schools had more resources to be able to do something. I mean, like I said, I can talk about this for another 20 minutes just on this subject, because being an elective teacher, I mean, we had our our facts teacher, which is considered home ec basically. There's so many things that could have been done with that class. We used to talk about this all the time. Like, there's so many kids who may want to be chefs, where you got a whole kitchen and things like that, but it has to be approved by the district just for you to do half of anything in there. But if you teach them, and maybe after school you have some sort of a chef's club or anything like that for kids who just want to cook, who want to learn how to cook, or anything like that, just some life skills type stuff. Teach them how to wash clothes properly. Teach them how to clean properly. I mean, all this types of stuff, and that could be something in and of itself. But I mean, you just don't get a lot of that always provided for every single student, outside of the typical sports and a few other different clubs. I mean, you get a little bit more in high school, but somebody's always going to feel left out. So I wish that they would continue to try to make even more concerted efforts to try to make sure that extracurricular activities are rewarded as well. Like, there has to be some sort of motivation behind it, and if they could be rewarded more and more emphasis on that, who knows what that can do for behaviors, what that can do for attendance. I mean, all types of stuff. I've been advocating. I've tried to push using sports as a as a motivator for years, and it usually got shot down, unfortunately, because it just didn't fit within the typical realm of, I hate to keep using the same word, the bureaucracy of how the schools typically operated. And I felt like we missed so many opportunities with so many different kids. Who knows where they could have been had we leveraged the extracurricular activities and sports in general, had we did that. So
yeah, it's like we're focused on getting a test score for funding rather than student growth. And if only we could just find that same money bin where they were able to buy the Chromebooks. If only we could just find where that money came, that same kind of magic gold chest that was able to buy all that technology. Well, Brandon, this has been awesome, dude. I wish we could talk for hours, man, but I really appreciate you hanging with me. And this has been for Brandon Williams. Thank you for also talking with Fresh. Thank you for tuning into Educators Podcast. I am Mr. Burden, and we will see you next time. Catch full episodes of the Educators Podcast every Thursday at 4 p.m. Real educators with the real issues in education. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, take care of yourself. Jeans passes to anyone who likes, shares, and comments on this video. Have a great week.